All right, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. The dungeon. Crispy out here tonight, all bundled up, ready to record this awesome session. So, subscribe. Make sure you're subscribed to whatever you're listening to. Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify. We're everywhere. We're on all the channels. So, whatever you like to listen to, make sure you're tuned in and you're ready to listen. Snuggle up next to a warm fire with some hot chocolate and enjoy this episode. Appreciate you definitely taking your time out of your night to do this with me and come on the podcast. Really appreciate that.
Hey, man, not a problem.
Whenever you have somebody with some sort of educational background as well as experience, it definitely, those two things work together pretty nicely.
It was kind of weird because, I got my PT cert, in the middle of my undergrad, but I had already been a competitive athlete for, in terms of, powerlifting. I'd already been powerlifting for, 3 years at that point. I'd already had my first meet, and I was working my way into doing my second. But, I already had ample training experience, and then I was in, an exercise science program because I was going to go pre-PT, and then I switched because physical therapy was boring. I just didn't like it. It's weird, because I love corrective exercise, but I didn't dig the thought of being in a PT office, which almost seems counterintuitive, but, I enjoy working with athletes. So if I get to correctively rehab them, that's cool. But, rehabbing Darla Ives, who's 77 and fell and had a hip replacement, God bless her soul, but also, that's boring to me. I don't enjoy that.
So if you just want to kind of introduce yourself and let the people know who you are, what you do, where you're from, a little bit about all that.
My name is Jason Bevill, and I hail from Augusta, Georgia, which is surprisingly not small town because it's the home of the Masters tournament.
Right.
So, the one thing that we're known for. So for 1 week, we're super important. I have an undergraduate degree in exercise science. Kinesiology is the broad banner. I did a little bit of concentration switching. I was pre-physical therapy. I switched to nutrition and then switched to exercise science the following semester. And the only reason I did that is because going the nutrition route, which is something I do plan on doing, would have set me back a semester and a half. So effectively a full year, because I would have had both organic chemistries and then biochem. So I would have had at minimum 2 more semesters of college. And I was at my junior year, halfway through it when I switched. Obviously, I didn't want to pick up the 5th year when I was already almost done. I got into powerlifting pretty young. I've always been, I don't want to say a polyathlete, but I've always been a little too ADHD to focus on one thing. I did martial arts, theater, and powerlifting all in conjunction. Although I didn't compete for a while, I started training when I was, seriously, when I was 14. I've been lifting weights. Well, you know how that goes. Dad has a pair of dumbbells and just kind of do what he does. But yeah, I got serious about it when I got out of high school. And after high school into college, I competed in powerlifting until I was 21. And then here's the fun thing that actually a lot of people who know me personally don't know about me. I almost went to the hospital with basically a full immune system shutdown because your boy did the really smart idea of dropping as low a body fat percentage as he could in a given time frame. It was 7 or 8 months. I dropped down to 8% at 182-ish pounds. And I was still powerlifting at this time. Well, I came into the gym one day with a beef with the universe on about 3 hours of sleep and no food in my system. And I pulled 565 on deadlift, which was a lifetime goal for me. And then I fell critically ill with a 103 fever for 3 days. And that kind of set me back a little bit because as you can imagine, nearly going to the hospital, even if you recover from it without the hospital, really, really does not incentivize your body to start doing that stuff again. I took some time off just kind of to get myself together and not, kill myself again. And then I switched into strongman when I was 22 years old. And now here I am at 24 and a half, almost to the month. So powerlifting got a little too linear. So at 182 pounds, I was already squatting almost 3 times body weight. I was already deadlifting well over 3 times body weight. I was benching close to 2 times body weight. Not to be nose in the air about it, but I was good at powerlifting from the jump. I didn't have a hard time breaking barriers. When I was like 165 soaking wet in high school, I was still pulling 455. Like, my body is just good at being strong. But strongman has the curveball of you have to not only be a good presser and a good puller, you also have to do it for about 4 or 5 hours, and you have to have the cardio to keep up with it. And there are some absolute animals in strongman. Whether they are 160 pounds or 260 pounds, they can freaking move. And it's scary.
Yeah, that's pretty intimidating for sure when you see somebody that big with that much endurance too.
Yeah, and they're not just like, you know, all right, looking at like World's Strongest Man, it's okay, like of course, like Rob Kearney, Nick Best, all of them, like okay, sure, which those are two of my favorites, is why I just pointed them out. But like, sure, you see it and you're like, okay, they're big dudes, they can move weight. But when you use the implements and you realize like how ungodly heavy those weights are relative to what you can do. Like when I first started, a 550-pound yoke, that was my first yoke event ever. Training up to that, 570 felt like death. I could hardly move it. To put that into perspective, the dudes at World's Strongest Man level are doing like 1,000, 1,200, 1,300-pound yokes, and they're running with them.
Wow.
I was struggling to pick up 570, and they were booking it at a light jog, 1,300 pounds. And there's no way to slice that. That's just inhuman. Like, it's stupid strong. There's no amount of gear that gets you there. You got to be a little bit crazy. Those guys are probably a little more than a little, but I'll let them talk about that. Like Brian Shaw's video where he saved the person from their car or whatever. He was like, and I just thought, I'm going to have to bend this door in half. Like, say that as a human, mean it. And he was for real, and he did it.
Is it the fact that it's just not kind of a normal, like, you know, you pick up a dumbbell and it fits, and you pick up a barbell and it fits? Like, whenever you're training, you know, powerlifting or bodybuilding or whatever with typical equipment, is it just the fact that it's meant to be easier to move as far as just like working with your body, or what's that, you know, because you said, you know, you got to use certain implements. Is it just harder as far as like the structure of the implement to move it?
To a degree, yes. There's a lot of like caveat to that is the only unfortunate part about the question. A lot of the draw to it for me personally is I set a goal very early on in life, and I meant this, and I still mean this today, when I was about like 17 years old or so. I want to be one of the strongest humans on the planet. That's just what I want to do. Whether or not I will get there, who knows? But at the same time, I don't know until I know. So until I'm like both feet in the grave, I'm not going to stop pursuing that goal. And I've gotten a hell of a lot farther than I ever thought that I was going to, just with that thought in mind of like, I got this goal and I'm going to go there. It didn't matter if it's an ocean in a different continent, I'm going to get there. Or I'm going to drown in the ocean. But either way, I'm going to figure out if I sink or swim. Like, it doesn't matter. The other portion of it is, and I don't know that too many people outside of strongman that don't follow it like know this. Even as far up as the rules meeting itself, they can change the implements used. So in my second strongman event ever that I did, competition, not literal singular event. It was the first event. It was a press medley. It was a log, an axle, a Mauser block, which if you've ever seen it, it looks like a steel suitcase that they have to put on their chest and then press overhead. Believe it or not, for those things to only be 200 to 300 pounds for pros that are putting up 400 to 500 overhead, they are unwieldy. Like, that is a heavy implement to be that light. Anyway, it was that, and then like a Viking press of some sort. Well, when we get there, the axle was literally just a plumber's pipe with sleeves fitted onto the end of it, meaning it was a hollow tube with no weight to it. And as someone who lifts weights but has never had to work out with a plumber pipe, having all that centripetal force on the ends of the bar makes it basically try to decapitate you as soon as you clean it. So I failed my axle press and effectively bombed out of the meet. I still competed, but I had lost. And they did that, the rules meeting. They said, by the way, we didn't bring any axles, so we had to figure something out. Good luck. Dude, that humbled the crap out of me. Even like later events, okay, so like natural stones, for example. The natural stone event doesn't even need to be changed because the event itself presents the random variable of what's the shape of the freaking stone. Like the one that we had was 200 pounds. It was an oval. Well, the one that the lightweight open people had was a triangle, and the one that the heavyweights had was basically a square, like a really weirdly jagged square. And it was like 300 pounds. But like, you only know the weight of the stone. They don't even tell you the shape. They don't even let you see it. Nowhere. They just, you just up, and you're like, you better get it, because someone will.
If you think about it, I mean, in the most basic person who like has never done strongman, if you just think about like you order something off Amazon and you get something in a weird size box and it's like it's not that heavy, but just the shape of it makes it so awkward and so challenging to move.
Yeah, it could be like 30 pounds, but it feels like 70 because the box you have to grip it like that, and there's no leverage. You just have to figure.
Do you see or are there a lot of injuries during a competition just based on the fact that like you're going to try to do it no matter what?
So I've done 3 strongman competitions, and I've done 4 powerlifting meets. I competed in 2 of them. I coached 1, and then I spot loaded for the other. Between all of that, I have seen a handful of very minor injuries in powerlifting. I see at least 1 to 3 medium to severe injuries at every strongman event I've been to or that I've watched. The scariest one actually was in my first competition ever. I was a lightweight novice, and we had a 265 stone over bar. The bar was 52 inches, so it's like 4.25 feet or 4 1/3 feet high, which doesn't seem like that high until you realize you're sitting with 270 pounds in your chest, and it's rock. If he was even 100 pounds or 180 pounds soaking wet, I'd be surprised. He was not a large guy. He was strong, and he was very fast. He just wasn't big. And unfortunately, an Atlas stone at some point will come down 2 size, in my opinion. Now, I get that. I'm just a middleweight open competitor. Cool. People can argue that. That's fine. But this kid, he gets it to the bar. And the issue is, if it clips on this side of the circle, on your side, you then have to press it over, which means effectively you need to be able to incline press whatever that stone is, because that's how it feels functionally. Well, he, at 180 pounds, probably could not do that. He sat with that stone on his chest for easily 15 to 20 seconds. It was nearly half of his event. Well, he passes out because of the pressure in his chest, the stone falling into him. And it was this weird, like, lizard brain reaction. His eyes were already rolled back into his head. He reached over and threw himself out from under the stone. The stone broke the platform piece that it hit. It just broke it, meaning that kid probably would have just straight up died. The second competition, I watched a guy do a sprint with a 250-pound stone. You see where the trend is going. And then he face planted. It was a stone carry. And he dipped forward with his arm still underneath it, and he shredded the skin off of both arms. I've watched dude palm skin off. Not flat, off during a deadlift event. That's with straps involved. I've seen stuff like that. A good buddy of mine, actually, Arthur, if he ever sees this, yes, I'm talking about you. He got hit in the face with the log that he was meant to press. He's one of the best pressers I know. And I think the reason why is because that one time with that one log basically took him out at the forehead. The past year, like, dude, this was not a long time ago.
Did it, like, freak you out when you saw that first one happen? Like, were you like, maybe I'm not in the right thing, or did it not even faze you?
No, I'm going to be honest. I was on a huge ego high. That was my first car deadlift event ever as well. And I was one of only 3 people to actually do it. And that's not a bragging point, because the 2 guys who beat me repped it for like 5 or 6 reps. So it apparently was not nearly as heavy as I thought it was. But I was on an ego high, so I wasn't really thinking about it at the time. But like, we were in the car ride home, and I was looking at my friend, and I was like, yo, that guy almost died. Like, it kind of sunk in after the fact. It's more the shell shock of it. Like, you're so worried about the person that you don't even factor in the, like, what could have been. You're just glad that they're not dead. And you kind of just from that point, because everyone's kind of hyped on adrenaline, because they have to still do an event. He was like the second or third person up at 15 people. So what are you going to do? Well, you can opt out, but someone's going to do it.
Are you currently training at like a place where you have those implements to train with, or do you have those, at if you have a home gym? Like, how do you train right now for that?
So I recently switched gyms. The other gym had most of the implements, but, and this is going to sound odd, you can get away with majority of all strongman training between like your SBDO, like your squat, bench, deadlift, and overhead on just the barbell. If you get, I would venture to say, if you buy a pair of farmer's handles, a pair of fat grips, which are like $40 or something like that, you can get like 98% of the training done. Because even with a log clean and jerk or a clean and press, a log and a barbell are functionally very similar. The difference being where the center of mass is and also how you hold it in the front rack position. So like jerking a log is an act of heroism and simultaneous terror. But outside of that, the log and the barbell function pretty similarly if you've touched it at least once. Gotcha. I've seen people touch the log in their life that could clean and jerk 245. They put up a 225 log like that with no issue. So the carryover is very high. So as long as you have the stuff to work your grip and the farmer's handles to condition the overall axial skeleton and the grip strength, you can kind of get away with most things, in my opinion, at least.
Is there any specific kind of cardio training that you do or some kind of endurance training that you do for that?
Usually circuits. It is a little CrossFit sounding, but usually when I'm in prep for an actual meet, I usually start, give or take, about 3 to 4 months out. Kind of depends on the severity of the event. I was supposed to do Georgia's Strongest Man, so that was a 4-month prep, and then it kept getting moved around, and I decided not to do it. But depending on the severity of the event, 3 or 4 months out, the first month to month and a half is focused entirely on strengthening and just getting to a point where I feel comfortable or at least within reach of hitting those weights, because I don't actively recover to 100%. It's just part of my programming. It's part of my training style. It's how I do it. I never do a full 100% recovery. I don't want to know what I can do on a good day, because in my opinion, you're never going to have the perfect day for a meet. Now, what you can do when you're at 80% recovery, when you didn't sleep well, and you maybe got half the amount of food you needed, that could simulate a few. Your anxiety, your lack of preparedness, too much stress, maybe the water, this has happened to me, maybe the water table and the bacteria in it didn't agree with you and you got food poisoning. So you didn't eat that day. Well, now what good does that fair weather day do for you if you don't have your fair weather day? Like you got what you got, like you better do it. But a lot of it ends up being circuit training for the latter month and a half. And at that point, that's about as close as I'm going to get to 100%. I would be hitting about 80 to 90% submax and just focusing on reps and rounds and as little rest as humanly possible for about like a 2-hour time span. Most strongman events end up being about 4 to 5 hours, but you get ample rest in between. Until people start like dropping events like that, like they start waving themselves off, which doesn't usually happen, to be honest with you. Until that point, the events usually give you about 5 to 10 minutes in between. So if you're used to functioning without the rest time, well, then you just feel like you're having a great day.
Right.
That's how I treat it, and it hasn't failed me yet.
I'm assuming it sounds like they tell you the weights of everything that you're going to be doing, but they don't tell you. And they give you the implements as well? Like, how does that work beforehand?
It kind of depends on the event. Some organizers are really, really like on it, and they'll have like some event organizers, even as far as like a year in advance, they'll have almost all of their events already planned. Not necessarily the weights, but at least what they're going to be. In strongman, you can always guarantee a few things. There's always going to be a stone somewhere. There's going to be a stone. And if you don't know where it's at, figure it out, because it's going to be there. I promise. There's always going to be a press. There's always going to be a press, always going to be a stone, and there's always going to be some form of deadlift. Whether it's an axle, it's a frame, it's a car, it's a whack, it doesn't matter. It's going to be a deadlift of some kind. And the leverages could be weird. A lot of times they will show you the implements. Like they didn't necessarily show us the natural stones, because they literally said we're just going to pick them up like the day before, because they were right next to a rock quarry. So like, what do they have to do? But like, as far as that goes, like for the car deadlift, we already knew what the racks looked like, the ramps, excuse me. For the Atlas stones, like we knew the weights. Usually we get to see the axles, or at least we get told what kind of axles they are. And usually in the case of a log, if it's not like a Viking press or something like that, if it's a log, we're usually told if it's a Titan log or a Monster log or a Slater, like anything like that. We're usually given some amount of clue. And like I said, it's subject to change, but we're at least given something to go on. They're going to change, but it's rare that they do a full 180. So they'll be roundabout where they need to be.
Do you have something that you really like an implement or an event that you really enjoy or really like?
Oh, deadlifting, 100%. Deadlifting has been my favorite lift since I was a child, since I was like 12 years old. Just the raw aggression of just picking something heavy up off the ground and then throwing it back into the earth, there's nothing like it. Like, it just is what it is.
So you talked a little bit about having that mindset of no matter what, you're gonna try to achieve your goal, and basically nothing's gonna stop you. Do you think that's kind of the back there in the back of your head when you want to do exercise science? You're just trying to figure out you want to get the best information and figure out for yourself like how I'm going to do this, what it's going to take.
To a point. I'll be honest. At some point, I wanted to do core strength and conditioning, so I wanted my CSCS. And then I realized, unfortunately, the career field just requires a lot of brown nosing, to be just completely frank about it. And anyone who's been in kinesiology can tell you that. That's the reason a lot of strength coaches opt out of being strength coaches. But part of it was honestly to help people. Like, it wasn't, okay, I mentioned that I got my trainer cert and I started training people with like real work experience, and I was a competitive athlete halfway through my degree. So the issue with that was not issue, but the thing about that was that I had a focus of wanting to help people, and I always had the background goal of helping myself, because effectively humans are always humans. I have the most experience with myself, therefore I know what isn't going to work for me. And as like the old saying goes, like, if you try 100 things and none of them work, at least now you have 100 less things to try.
Right.
So like the way that I did it, like, I would do things for other people, things that I knew would work, and then I would try stuff on myself and see if it worked or not. So I would use myself as a guinea pig before I tried it on other people. So at least it had a sample size of 1, and 1 person could make it work. I'm realizing now, not in this interview, but like, I'm realizing now that like there is a pitfall to it, because unfortunately genetic limitation is the thing and you can't control age. So like, what may work for me at 24 may not work for a 34 or a 44-year-old. But with time, you kind of just get a sense of that working or not working. So you kind of just adjust for it silently without really talking about it a lot. Part of it was getting the best information, but I had such a large knowledge base as it stood from just like a bro science perspective that a lot of it was really figuring out what wasn't real in the real world. Like, what could I take in a textbook and then use as a lens when I got out into the real world to look at that stuff? What sounds like it might work and what immediately just sounds like, okay, no, that's not gonna happen. Everything that I do is based on motor pathways, stimulus and stress response, and just biomechanical leverages. I don't teach certain clients certain ways how to lift, because I tell them you'll use it as an accessory, but unless you demonstrate to me that your leverages will allow for that, I don't think they will. I'm not going to have you do it as like a max effort or as like your main bar move. Or here's a good one. Some bench pressers bench better wide. I have really long arms. You would think shortening range of motion would make me stronger. My strongest PR is a close grip bench press at 365. Defeating all point of everything, because I can't engagement with a wide grip because my leverages are off. Logic tells you that should work, but experience told me no. And things like that happen all the time. And that's the jarring part about having education and experience, is like when education tells you one thing, but then experience just throws out the window. It's like, okay, I know how the book said to do it, but that also takes 3 hours and this takes 5 minutes. You have to get to a point where you realize that it's only finite things that you may be wrong about, and it's not a reason to throw out your entire knowledge base. Because unfortunately, as academics, that's what you're taught. This is wrong, this is now right, get rid of that. But it's not nearly so black and white once you're in the real world. It's like, it worked for Daniel, but it didn't work for Jason. But hey, John over there, it still worked for. So what do we do about Jason? Like, it doesn't become like a black and white area. It's like, okay, what do we do with the gray area? It kind of works, but it doesn't. So what are the other variables involved? And that's something I feel like in exercise research, specifically, not nutrition, but exercise by itself, I feel like a very underutilized metric that no one really uses is when doing certain exercises, trying to find a trend in strength or size increase with the joint length. like with the actual length of the limbs. I think personally, if we actually stratify any given exercise research, everyone's untrained. Let's just bar that right now. If we stratified it, a bunch of people 5 foot to 5'6", a bunch of people 5'7" to 6 foot, and as many people as we can find that are like 6'1" plus, because we know that starts getting like uncommon, and then it's just an issue of sample size. So let's say we try to do 10, 10, and 10. That's reasonable. We put them all under the exact same program, same sets, same reps, same rests, and then just observe the differences with the inevitable difference in limb length and joint angles. Because I think that would be a lot more valuable to the lifting community than it would be as like a clinical standpoint.
So do you think that having that educational background has helped you compared to other people maybe in strongman that are competing that don't have that?
I think it helps me communicate more than anything. I don't think it necessarily helps me as a competitor, because honestly, I think in a certain sense that it actually makes me think a little too much about things, when in reality I kind of just need to have a Jesus take the wheel moment and just do stuff. So, there's that. There's the issue of overthinking and overcomplicating the issue. But I think it helps me communicate to people who say, like, don't do strongman. Like, I feel like I've done a pretty good job communicating what it's like as a competitor to you, because I have the educational background to not say, big man, pick up heavy rock. Like, sure, okay, yeah, you saw that on TV. I didn't need to tell you that for you to there. But it's different to like articulate what it's like in a meet. And like how things are affected, like, okay, the reason an axle is harder than a barbell for a deadlift, the only reason why is because the center of gravity is about an inch further out than what you're used to. And it changes every leverage that you have. It becomes a new neural pathway. Now, for someone like you, that makes sense. But I would have to say the axle is thicker, therefore it brings it further away from the body, so it changes how you do it. But I don't know how to articulate that in just like a layman's terms without the education behind it. Like, I have to bring it up so I can scale it back for people. And I think that helps me a lot with that. Because I get in with I'm too focused on explaining it the technical way without dumbing it down. And I think having the education and learning how to dumb it down helped. Backtracking even a little bit further than that, like, I started doing martial arts when I was 12. So like one of the most like carryover and translatable movements is picking something heavy up off the ground, because you're always going to need to pick somebody up or to throw them or to do something with them. So being able to manipulate, even if it's only one plane of motion, that amount of weight has a huge impact on performance as far as that goes. So it was my favorite for that initially. And then I realized I was just actually kind of good at it. And then that's how it kind of transpired into my like powerlifting and strongman stuff as my favorite event.
Yeah, I could see where that would, your body being able to, and your brain being able to figure out like leverage. I could see where that'd be very helpful with strongman, especially. It's just so varied.
We also have to be able to react under pressure. What happens if you drop the yoke? What happens if your hand slips? You have to be able to just, there's a certain amount of like reaction and like, screw it, I'm just going to do this, that you have to have in strongman, because to a point, like the curveball could be you, is basically what I'm saying. Yeah. At any point in time, your body could just decide that it doesn't want to do what you want to do anymore. And at that point, you got to either be really strong of will, or you have to be so calm under fire that it doesn't even look like you messed up at all. It's like, okay, I pulled a bicep. Is it torn? Can I get away with still competing? A buddy of mine, he mid-yoke carry with a 700-something pound yoke, tore his Achilles and his gastroc. He tore his calf and his Achilles at the same time. He made the active decision under fire exactly how to deal with that and to finish the event with a torn up bottom half of his leg. They were not mild tears at all. But as it happened, even in the video, you saw, first of all, the 5 stages of grief immediately. You saw the 5 stages of grief, but you immediately saw the calm take over, and he just immediately assessed, and he was like, can I do this? I can't. Let's keep going. And it all happened in less than 2 seconds, because every second counts. So you have to be able to react like that, or understand when you've either been beat or you're injured to the point that if you do it, you'll cripple yourself, and just decide for yourself that you don't want to. You see it in World's Strongest Man all the time. They'll wave themselves off. Say, you know what? I'm done. Good. Got my reps in. Whatever I get is what I get. Because they know I need more energy for later events. Maybe I got a micro injury, or maybe I re-aggravated something that happened in prep. That happens all the time too. it's probably not very surprising. A lot of people in strongman at the competition day are injured. They'll be like, yeah, I've been dealing with a tweaked up trap or something on my neck, or yeah, I'm still recovering from my hands tearing open 2 weeks ago on an axle. Like, any number of things could happen. And they'll just show up with a taped up hand saying, yo, let's go. I prepped 4 months. I'm gonna see what I can do.
How does somebody prepare for something like that kind of devastating injury that you can't simulate? How do you prepare for that?
So a lot of it is understanding your own kinesthetics. A lot of people understand if they're subject to certain injuries. Like, okay, I have a pretty consistently like re-aggravated, I would call it a micro injury at this point. I was doing a 650 yoke run at one point, and I took one wrong step and fractured one of my cuboids, the small square bone in my foot. And it's not very pivotal to the function of the foot, so I'm not going to lie, I just kept training on it. Yes, it was broken, but what are they going to do besides put you in a boot and say, hey, don't walk on it? As far as I was concerned, and I had tested this at this point, I figured out what range of motion I could and couldn't do, how much rotation was too much, how much pressure I could put on it, and I just kept training around it. So some of it comes with just the experience of, unfortunately, and I hope no one else gets injuries like this, although it'll probably happen, it comes with sometimes getting the injury. But even more so than that, there are ways to simulate, like, what happens if you mess up an event. Like, what if you have a tendency to tear your hands? You're training with straps. So you do a deadlift about halfway up, you let the bar go. And then you immediately re-wrap as fast as you can and then pull the full rep. Like, practicing failing reps intentionally at lighter weights to teach your body it is okay to mess up. Just keep going. There's a very, very popular way of training the yoke where you only carried about 25 or 30 feet of an intended 50 to 100 feet. And you pick it about 20 or 30, you intentionally drop it and immediately reset and then go. Because you're simulating that one bad step. That broke my foot, it may not break yours, but it'll still make you drop the implement. Huh. And everything that implement's on the ground is the second you just lost. You just have to be really clever about how. Because when you're prepared or you've at least experienced what that feels like, it doesn't jar you. You don't get an anxiety response to it. You're like, oh, okay, that happened. Like, that's it. That's your only reaction. You don't have like a breakdown about it. You don't even have a moment to think. You just like, oh, okay, that happened. Now I'm prepared.
So is it more common to have those missteps during an event or like during a whole competition, or is it more common to kind of roll through them all and kind of have not as many missteps? Do you know what I'm saying?
I would say it kind of depends on experience. My first event ever, I messed up every single implement. All of them at least once. I nearly hit myself in the face with the log. I almost went into someone else's lane with the farmer's handles. I'm 98% sure I dropped the yoke. I'm going to blame that on someone having sweat on the floor because I definitely felt my foot just come out from under me. The Atlas Stone, I had a moment where it actually clipped the underside of the bar I was supposed to be putting it over, and it just shot out of my hands immediately, and that would have probably crippled me had it hit my feet. But it hit the bar because I was just too close to it. The car deadlift, the second rep that I got, I was standing a little too far back on my heels, and I actually missed the rep by judge commands because I fell off balance as I locked it out. I messed up every implement that any way you could have messed up, I probably did it. But like with experience, you mess up less and less. My last strongman meet, which unfortunately was almost a year and a half ago because of just COVID. Like that event was probably my best showing ever. In my opinion, I executed everything except the circus dumbbell flawlessly, and the circus dumbbell is my worst event. So I'll take it.
Yeah.
And I only got I don't remember, it was like 56, something like that, out of like 20 something people. Like I didn't place that well, but it was my best showing, and it was the most improvement. Even on video, like I had basically zero screw ups outside of the one press.
I think in a way it's sometimes when you can get that out of the way early, it doesn't leave as much to be anxious about. You're like, okay, yeah, I've screwed this up. I know what it feels like to screw it up during like prime time, and it's kind of a learnable moment and something that you can actually benefit from. Kind of curious about the community as far as strongman goes. Is it something where you get to to where it's being held and you see guys and it's like, hey, what's going on? Or is it very kind of competitive and very like, is there a bunch of ill will, or is it kind of like a bunch of guys that are just like happy to see each other?
Bit of column A, bit of column B. I wouldn't say ill will. I wouldn't say that. Everyone is hyper competitive. Like, no, just because my best friend's on the platform with me does not mean I want him to win. Like, I want to win. I want the trophy. He can have second. I want first. Like, there's always that, but it's kind of like an understood. In all, albeit short, in my 2.5 years of competing, I have made more friends in strongman than I have ever had enemies. I can't actually think of a single strongman that I have met that I didn't like, to be completely honest. As far as it goes, most of it has to do with the fact that you're not allowed to pick your weights. So you're all just kind of like in the mud together. Here's a good way to look at strongman. It's not necessarily who was the best athlete. It was who survived the most. It's a lot less about doing your best. It's a lot less about not dying in the process. So all of us at some point kind of get to the point where we're like, oh, this is going to suck. We look at each other and we're like, I'm going to beat you though. Like, it's just that sort of thing. Like, you all know it sucks, but you still want to win.
Yeah, so that, like, competition in the midst of just, like, the suck is what kind of pushes you and, like, you know that you're physically drained, but I want to, like, beat you kind of thing. Would it be harder with, like, no competition there to, like, push you?
I would say it would be harder to do my absolute best. I would still be competitive just for the sake of I know my own times and like my own weights and stuff like that. So like I would want to be doing better than myself. There's no room for ego in the training room. You got all the room for ego on the platform because that's when it matters. Like it does not matter if you pull 600 in training, but if you know you can pull 600 in training and a 635 deadlift comes up that you've never pulled before, but your buddy who you were just laughing with just repped it. Now I got to beef with the world. Now I want to know if I can do it. So, like, there is a point of your competitiveness and desire to beat those people. Even if it's, like, kind of like a bro-down camaraderie thing, it pushes you to, like, an absolute limit. And there is nothing like stepping on a stage and performing in front of, even if it's a small crowd, like a crowd of people with other just strong as frick dudes just to do it. Like, there's nothing like it. If you're going to do strongman, I would be, personally, way more invested in how you do relative to your own expectations versus everybody else, because strongman, as an untested sport, is dominated by a lot of special vitamins. So just be aware, coming in as someone who only takes their Flintstone gummies, you may not have the best odds at winning at Joe, who's been taking the special Kool-Aid since he was 18, 23, and 230 pounds with abs. Yeah. So I would go in with an expectation for yourself, not how you're going to do relative to others. That was probably like the only learning curve that I had, was just kind of getting used to that fact.
Some people are willing to sacrifice more to do it, and some people aren't, and that's fine, but you can't judge yourself, obviously, against somebody that's doing something that you're not willing to do.
Yeah, that's honestly exactly how I see it. The only reason I competed untested in a USPA when I was a lot younger, when I was just powerlifting, the only reason I did that is because my exact thought was, well, if they want to run gear, let them, because people do it in the drug tested division all the time. I mean, I think it's a scummy thing to do, like, don't do it, but people still get away with it. So I'd rather just compete untested, where at least I can go in with the expectation, all these guys are on gear. Even if they're not, I can at least lead with the expectation of that, which is way healthier for my ego than, say, this one dude who's cockstrong at 174 pounds, who has a bag full of needles, but gets by with his drug testing. Like, there's no way to know that. And that guy could be natural. He might not be. But the issue is knowing that it could happen really just kind of puts a thorn in my side, and I don't like it. I'd rather the field be even, and like you said, I'm just unwilling to commit to that, than it be an issue of getting away with it instead. It didn't get brought to my attention until Alan Thrall released a YouTube video, and it was a super clickbaity title. It was, what was it? It was like 1995 World's Strongest Man or something. It didn't even click. Back in the day, like the 80s and 90s, they were not doing that much heavy lifting. Like, nothing even close to what they're doing now, with like 501 kilo deadlifts and 1,300 pound yokes and 900 pound squats for reps and things like that. Like, they didn't really start getting into that until the 2000s because strongman was supposed to just look cool. And then people and spectators were like, yeah, but I want to watch them lift heavy stuff. Like, not stuff that I can see in a commercial gym, like you said. I want to watch a man like, okay, what was 06 or maybe 2010s? I can't remember which World's Strongest Man it was. They pulled a plane like a passenger jet. Like, that was just an event that they had to do. Why? Because it was cool. It didn't matter. But it's not something you could go to Gold's Gym down the road and just watch a guy do. Those were men that were bred to be like just oxen and livestock that were given a human mouth. Like, that's about it. Yeah. They're like, hey, cool. I want you to drag it. That'll kill me. You're up in 3. Like, that's it. That was the whole event planning to that.
I wonder if they even remember it. Is it just like this blackout scenario?
Some don't. Eddie Hall, if you've ever watched him talk about his world record deadlift, he said, I blacked out and I came to and I was standing with the weight. That man had 1,100 pounds in his hands and said, yeah, I blacked out. That's a terrifying thought. That's one of those moments where, and this is also something that I'm, for credibility's sake, I'm not going to broach on too much, but it's kind of like the more spiritual aspect of lifting where, like, your brain, your soul, and your body, for a brief instant, all get to the exact same place and everything is quiet. Because if anything misfires, that's it. That's an injury. There's no room for error when you're moving that amount of weight. I don't care if you're Eddie, if you're Thor, if you're Rob Kearney, Nick Best, Brunch, doesn't matter. Zavika is like one of the greatest strongmen of all time. Doesn't matter. Any room for error, and they will tell you, they will give up a weight long before that room for error ever shows its head. And you can watch them on stage do it. They say, nope, I'm good. Because they felt it about to happen and understood there was no chance.
So, yes, great stuff. Learning more about strongman. But anyway, appreciate you for tuning into the weight room. And as always, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Wherever you listen to podcasts, though, subscribe there. We're pretty much everywhere. Find us on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you for tuning in, and see you on the other side of the other side, because this is the end of the outro. For real, though. So, bye.